From the TVC studios in Seattle, this is Seattle Citizen. Your home for discussions on issues affecting the people of Seattle. Bringing together citizens and city government. Here's your host for Seattle Citizen, C.R. Douglas.
Welcome to the program. Today, Seattle Citizen begins a series of shows looking at the finalist candidates in all 5 city council positions up for grabs this fall. During this hour, we feature 2 races. In position 1, Judy Nicastro faces Cheryl Chow. They'll be here during the second half of the program. With me now in the studio are the finalists for city council position number 7. Heidi Wills is making her first run at elected office. Currently, she is a special assistant to King County Executive Ron Sims. And Charlie Chong is a familiar face and name to many. He was a member of the Seattle City Council from 1996 to 1997 when he ran and lost the mayoral election against Paul Shell. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for hosting this program.
We will start with some brief opening statements, 1 minute, about why you want this job. Heidi Wills, you first.
I'm running for Seattle City Council CR because we have some critical issues facing the city of Seattle. Right now we have among the worst traffic in the nation, we have a scarcity of affordable housing, and we have environmental concerns with Chinook salmon on the decline. Particularly transportation is the issue that I know best and the reason why I'm running. Citizens need to have more transportation choices. We need a sound transit system that works. We need more incentives to get people to use public transit. We need more east-west bus connections throughout the city of Seattle. We need to expand upon programs like I helped push through at the University of Washington, the UPass program. We need more bicycle lanes. I think a very critical issue in this race is also Initiative 695. Outside of the race that we're running in now.
Motor vehicle tax.
That's right.
Repeal.
That will have a serious impact on transportation services in the city of Seattle. So we need to also be cautious of that and vote against it in this campaign if we're very, very interested in solving traffic problems.
Charlie Chong, you were on this council once. Why do you want to be back?
Because, CR, this time the situation is such that I can be very effective and creative and happy. We have Nick Licata there, we have Peter Steinbruck, and with 3 open seats, we have a chance for bringing people like me onto the city council, and it could be a different city council than when I was on in 96 and 97. And despite the great economy and the booming economy and the wealth in the city, there are still a lot of us left out of it. And there still is a lot of people who don't have that confidence in their governance. And that's, for instance, as Heidi has mentioned, that's why 695 is an issue. And I hope to be there on the council for making the city something that people will have confidence in.
Heidi Wills, let me begin my questioning with you. You advertise as one of your major accomplishments during your term with King County government as helping to make housing more affordable. What are 2 or 3 of the programs that you worked on at the county government level that have worked and that you would adopt here in the city of Seattle?
One is we need more funding for affordable housing programs. King County has helped with securing HOF dollars, Housing Opportunity Fund dollars, which actually create more affordable housing in the city of Seattle. That's from the state government. So we need to secure more dollars, first of all, for affordable housing. We also need to work with neighborhoods to ensure that they will allow more housing where we have transit lines to support that. So Cynthia Sullivan, who I worked for in the King County Council, was a leader in, it's called TOD's Transit-Oriented Development, where we have more development right where we have transit stations. So Sound Transit, where Cynthia also served, has been a leader in advancing this notion of if we could have more housing where we have the transit lines to support it so people don't need to own a car to get around the city of Seattle.
So it doesn't make housing more affordable, it just makes living more affordable by reducing the need for a car?
That's part of it, but we also need to increase the supply of housing in the city of Seattle. Right now we have vacancy rates in many of the main areas of Seattle, like Wallingford, Green Lake, Capitol Hill, even the Rainier Valley and Ballard, of less than 2%. So if people are going to be able to find housing opportunities close to where they work, we need to supply that housing right here in the city of Seattle. And we can do that with 16 stations that are going in through Sound Transit. So that'll allow for more affordable housing.
Charlie Chong, let me ask you, what are 2 or 3 of the programs that you think work best to create affordable housing? Big issue for voters.
Well, one of the things we have to do, CR, is so far, the low-income housing projects have worked.
Meaning the ones the city has subsidized?
The ones the city has now. And what we need to do is to stop the Seattle Housing Authority from losing housing units when they redevelop the projects, like at Holly Park. Rainier Vista is going to be redeveloped. And when they do that, we lose several hundred low-income housing units.
And for voters who don't understand what the redevelopment is, briefly, it's to mix the incomes up in those communities?
They're converting the housing to partly market rate housing for people who are not necessarily low income. And then losing some of cutting back the number of low-income housing.
You'd oppose any of those redevelopments in the quote-unquote garden communities?
I oppose that at Holly Park, and I'm opposing it for Rainier Vista.
Heidi Wills, do you favor those redevelopments? The theory being, or the argument being, that mixing up those communities, which have been kind of all low-income, mixing them up, adding some market rate housing will benefit that community and make it a more diverse community. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I support mixed income. And the reason is
these redevelopments.
Right. Now we need to ensure that we have a 1-for-1 replacement. So all low-income units need to be replaced at least 1-for-1. So we're not losing any low-income units, or we're going to contribute to our homeless problem in the city of Seattle. So that needs to be first and foremost. But the idea of mixed income, I think, is very healthy for communities and for families, and I support it.
Is there a 1-to-1 replacement, as far as you know, in those Holly Park units? They certainly tout it as that being the goal.
What I'm told by low-income people in Rainier Vista is that was promised. The replacement actually is occurring in Auburn or somewhere out of the city, that the people are not being able to find other replacement housing in Seattle.
Let me move on here to another question.
Could I just add one more
briefly?
Thing? Because you asked about 3 things. Something very important in this campaign, and a difference between my opponent and myself, is I've supported growth management and the Growth Management Act. And Cynthia Sullivan on the King County Council helped write that act. We have 540,000 people currently living in Seattle, and it's estimated another 40,000 will live here. Unless we plan for that, unless we plan for where these people will live and how they will get to where they are going to work, we won't see growth management work, and it will compound our traffic problems. So I support growth management, and my opponent is on the record saying he does not support it in the city of Seattle. So we must support our neighborhood planning efforts that allow for more housing in exchange for more public amenities.
Fair enough. Charlie, you have talked about the importance of having what you call a progressive majority on the city council, something you don't believe exists now, meaning 5 of the 9, quote unquote, is progressive. However, when you lost your bid for mayor 2 years ago, wasn't the community saying, in effect, that Charlie Chong, we don't want your kind of progressivism to be in ultimate power at City Hall?
They didn't. I don't believe that's right. What they were really saying was they like me on the council, but they don't like me in the mayor's job.
But did they want you and 5 votes on the council, which in effect is...
That's not what they decided in the mayor's race.
That's not how you read that.
No, it was very simple. They, as an attorney in Rainier Valley said, I want him on the city council where there are other council members to balance him, but I don't want him in the mayor's office because then he's by himself, in power.
Heidi Wills, are you considered a progressive? Are you would you be part of a progressive majority if you were elected, like Charlie Chong hopes he would be?
Yes, if you read the David Brewster article, there's there's more progressive candidates in this race, and when I think of progressive, I think of someone who supports affirmative action, who supports child care programs, who supports health and human services programs, who supports affordable housing, and for reaching out for people of lower incomes, ensuring that they have a place at the table in the city and an opportunity to live in this city and contribute to our communities. So I support all these values.
Charlie Chong, how would you be a progressive in a way that your opponent wouldn't be?
To a large extent, CR, first, I don't label myself as a progressive. I'm a populist, a believer in the rights of people. And the difference, I think, comes down to growth management, as she mentioned earlier. Cynthia Sullivan, Heidi, and people in that group believe in densifying the city of Seattle in the hope that that will stop urban sprawl. And my argument is it doesn't. Look at the Sammamish Plateau. What you're trying to do is make decisions for people who won't follow your decisions. They're choosing housing outside of the city. They're not taking these condos in Belltown.
But isn't it the case that if you add more housing in the city and encourage more in-city development, don't you, by definition, at least limit, not stop, at least limit the amount of development you'll have outside in the county?
If you're increasing the kind of housing that these young people, and they're basically the young married people who are buying these houses outside of the city, if you build the kind of housing they want to buy, then they'll come to the city.
Do you think there's any room left? You mean, I assume you need sort of more suburban-style houses with picket fences and yards and dog runs.
And there isn't, so they're going where they can buy the houses they want.
And you say, what? Let's just accept that.
No, I don't. What I say is, if we want to stop urban sprawl, we'll have to buy the open space, and I learned that in 3 years of being on the Seattle Open Space Committee. To save open space, you have to buy it. And so I'm in favor of the city and the county buying a great big wide green belt
in the county.
Yeah. And that is going to stop urban sprawl effectively. And what I propose, CR, is let's spend as much as we did for one sports stadium and get a green belt that will last.
So instead of trying to save open space, if I understand you, by kind of encouraging development in the city, hoping it doesn't go in the county, you just preserve it by buying it.
Buying the land or buying the development rights, either or.
And where you don't buy the land, then allow development around it.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying.
I'm just wondering how you're going to stop sprawl.
That's the most effective way. Buy it.
Okay, Heidi Wills, your comment on buying up land to stop sprawl.
Well, I also support the fact that we need more parks and open spaces, but half of the growth in this region will be our own children. So if we don't provide for a place for them to live, housing prices will only get worse, and traffic congestion will only get worse if people can't afford to buy a home in the city of Seattle. What people are maybe like Charlie are afraid of is changing Seattle. We are a single-family city for the most part, except for some neighborhoods that are willing to accept more density. The neighborhood plan for the Denny Triangle, for example, looks forward to more than 2,000 new housing units right here in the core of Seattle. So there are some neighborhoods that are willing to accept more housing. But we need to support our neighborhood planning efforts. There's 37 neighborhoods who have said they are willing to accept more housing, but they don't want to just get bigger, they want to get better. They want more parks and open spaces and pedestrian-friendly walkways, and we should provide that by supporting the neighborhood plans. My opponent has not supported those neighborhood planning efforts.
Let me ask you about your background. You are 31 years old. You have certainly held some positions of responsibility. I think people looking at your resume would say that you're probably qualified for this job, and yet you're younger than almost anyone who's ever been elected to the Seattle City Council. Why are you in such a hurry?
Well, Wes Ullman, who was mayor, was my age 20 years ago. So I don't know that age is necessarily a qualification for office. I think good ideas is having a strong commitment and background in public service. I've been working for King County for the last 5 years, where I've actually been working on transportation, affordable housing, and environmental protection. So I have a background, I know how government works, I know who the players are, I have strong relationships with people who we can work together to help make these things happen. I have support from the King County Labor Council. I have support from the business community as well. I have a very broad array of support from the minority communities, from women's communities, from the folks in West Seattle. The 34th District Democrats support my campaign.
You think you have the experience to handle this?
Yes.
Charlie Chong, let me ask you the reverse. It is said by some that that maybe the reverse is true of you, that you've been around long enough and probably don't have the energy for a job like this. Is that fair?
Heidi and I both agree age is not the issue of this campaign. Her youth or my age. Okay? I've told Heidi this, that I will campaign on her experience and her contributors, where she gets her money from. And those are legitimate issues, and age and other issues are not.
Let's move on to another issue then, sound transit. You have said, Charlie Chong, that you oppose a surface light rail alignment down in southeast Seattle. Therefore, you wanted a tunnel, I suppose. Where do we get the money? About $400 million more to tunnel down there in southeast?
I think let me ask a different question. Why are we putting that light rail on the surface in the Rainier Valley?
And your answer would be?
Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should leave it with buses and electric trolleys to handle the transportation problems in the valley, and maybe the light rail should be elsewhere. I like what Paul Shell, the mayor of Seattle, has proposed. And
which is,
well,
he's proposed a couple different things about light rail. But
he said put it down the Duwamish. And I would be more in favor of running our light rail from Payne Field down to Renton Airport and taking care of Boeing workers and the business, the industries in those areas.
Well, that's a pretty big amendment at this late stage in the game, I guess. But let me ask you about the light rail route, just to follow up. Why? I assume it's your feeling that surface light rail is too disruptive.
Yes.
And the reason to do it by trolleys and
dangerous, and to the people of that area. Look at all the kids that you have in the Rainier Valley trying to cross that light rail route.
Heidi Wills, are you in favor of a surface light rail or a tunnel down southeast?
I'm in favor of the surface light rail, and I'll tell you why. I think that will bring wonderful economic opportunities, job opportunities, and housing opportunities, again, around where those stations will be in the Rainier Valley. I think we could use some improvements in Martin Luther King Way. Right now, it's very unpedestrian friendly, and it's unfriendly to bicycles. I'd love to see bicycle lanes go into that area, and this would allow for that. Also, I think that the people of that community deserve to have a light rail system go through their community. Only 20% of the people living in that area own cars. Don't own cars. So 80% own cars, but 20% don't. So what are they supposed to do for transportation alternatives and options? I think this would provide more transportation alternatives to the people living in that area.
Charlie Chong, you had a comment?
What I'm hearing is gentrifying the Rainier Valley and surrounding the transit stations with low-income housing. And I'm not so sure that the people in the Rainier Valley see that coming. But I think some of them are blinded, thinking that they're going to have their stores right around those transit stations and they're going to make more money or have a better opportunity. But nothing is going to preserve that. What's going to happen is we're going to have chain stores around those transit stations.
You don't think the ma and pa delis, restaurants
not if we develop Rainier Valley like she's talking about.
Because it's going to be too expensive for them? Is that, why?
Yes.
It's going to be too expensive?
Yes, the rent is going to be too high for the ma and pa stores. And so they're going to be moved out and replaced by Starbucks and places like that.
Another question about Sound Transit. I should ask, I shouldn't assume whether you both support going to Northgate. And if so, right now it just goes to the UW, really that's all the money they have. If you support going to Northgate, where are you going to get that money? That's another $300 million. Let me start with Charlie and then I'll...
Well, how about not going down to Rainier Valley and going to Northgate instead? I'm just proposing that.
But you mean
it's
stopping and...
It doesn't make sense to stop at the university. The university is congested, and you're going to bring more congestion to the university. Whereas if you put it in Northgate, you'll have more of an ability to handle the bus traffic and perhaps park and ride.
Where are you going to get the money, however?
Shift it.
Meaning by going to the Duwamish route,
Yes,
you feel like
yes.
you'd save more money, or just stop it, don't go all the way to the airport? When you mean shift it, what would you give up, I guess?
I give up the... well, why are we going to the airport, by the way? Who's going to carry bags on the light rail to the airport? Of course, I know there are people who work there that you want, but are their numbers better? That's an issue.
You might say, why go so far south?
Yes.
Yeah. Heidi Wills, your thought in going to Northgate, and do we have the money for it?
Right now, we don't have the money for it, but I hope that we will. I do believe that we should go to Northgate, that the University District is one of the most congested neighborhoods in the city of Seattle, so to end the terminus there is just not a good idea. Extending it to Northgate would allow for buses in downtown Seattle to be, that would relieve the pressure of buses in our downtown streets, and it would also increase ridership, which is the whole point of bringing Sound Transit to Northgate. But we don't have any state dollars for that. So we need to get some money from the state legislature. We don't even have a nickel from them. So that needs to be a top priority for us if we're going to see it extended to Northgate. And I think that we can do that. But I also think that it's important that we come together and say, this is the plan. We've got to make it work. The EIS is coming out October 15th. We need to have this plan ready to go and by November 18th if we're going to see our federal dollars come in for it. So we have our state senators, Murray and Gordon, telling us, get off the dime, or we won't be able to supply federal dollars for you. So we don't have time to tinker with whether this is going to go through the Rainier Valley or not.
It's a good point, Charlie. If you do want to get into that the federal queue in effect, you can't be making these kind of big changes, or can you? Your response?
Well, this is really dangerous and maybe dumb. See, that we're going to do our regional transit system perhaps badly just to get the federal money. The feds aren't that stupid. They're going to look
You used to be one of them, didn't
yes,
you?
they're not that stupid. They're going to look at that and at the plan and say, you rushed it, you're not convinced that this is the best plan. Why didn't you spend a little more time and make it what would really work for the people and work for riders and commuters and so forth? You haven't brought us that plan, but you're just so anxious to get our money.
Another question about transportation and transit. Heidi Wills, you tout, and I would too if I helped start the UPass program at the University of Washington. I think everyone thinks it's a pretty good idea, giving students and faculty and staff subsidized bus passes. Is that the kind of thing you can spread citywide, and would you push for some kind of subsidized bus pass program if elected?
Yes, and what I've been talking about in this campaign is the fact that having pushed this through at the University of Washington 10 years ago, amid controversy at that time, we now see how successful
Why was
it's
it controversial?
Because we had all students opt into it unless they chose to opt out. So they automatically received a bus pass with their student ID card.
And the bill.
And the bill on their
subsidized bill,
tuition,
yeah.
Exactly. And at the same time, we increased parking rates to help subsidize those bus passes.
So you could opt out. You didn't have to get it, but it was
Right.
a hassle to go
Exactly.
stand in line and say, I actually don't want this. And then they give
Exactly.
you a refund.
Yes.
Is it something you can do? Can you do that?
Yes.
And do you propose in your campaign to do that somehow for citywide residents, in a way, I guess, to do what you want to at the U, which is increase transit ridership?
Yes, there's a program through the county, through Metro, called the Flex Pass, and that's what this was a big part of in the late 80s. We can extend this to so many other sectors throughout the city of Seattle, working with employers, community colleges, so that we can expand this concept of universal pass to other city residents.
Charlie Chong, are subsidized bus passes the way to get more people on transit?
I think it's based on a false premise, and that is the assumption that people are not riding the bus because they don't have the money for a bus pass. People are riding their cars, driving their cars, because they find it convenient and necessary to do so. And unless you persuade them otherwise, and this doesn't, all this does is makes it cheaper for people who do ride the buses now.
You don't think it creates an incentive for those who aren't riding to?
No,
to
it
jump on?
doesn't.
What if you had a ride-free area through the whole system?
Even if you had free buses, a lot of people are not going to be riding those buses because those buses don't allow them to take their kids to the daycare center or to something else. Whatever you're assuming that people are driving their cars because they don't have the money or the convenience of riding the bus, and that's not true.
We're at 40% capacity. That is to say, 40%. If you just on average, the whole system, they're only 40% of the spaces are actually taken up. How do you, assuming we want to get to 100% or closer to that, how do you encourage people to take the bus if?
I've always said if you make the
bus
buses safe, riding the bus safe and convenient, meaning that it's safe to wait for a bus downtown, or even in some neighborhoods, safe for, let's say, women or men to not be assaulted at bus stations or bus stops. Okay? And second, it's got to be convenient, and it would be better to have buses run more often. You to put your subsidy in that, more frequent buses.
Instead of in rider discounts.
That's right. More frequent buses and more routes that go where people want to go.
Heidi Wills, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm not talking about government-subsidized bus passes, although I think whatever we can do to encourage people to ride the bus is a great idea. But working with employers or community colleges like we did with the University of Washington, which helped subsidize that pass with parking rates. Right now we have employers downtown giving their employees free parking spaces to go with their jobs. Why not have them instead give their employees free bus passes to go with their jobs? That's called an incentive.
So you don't favor government somehow giving
we are currently
a
subsidizing. Yes, we are subsidizing buses currently. We are not making through the fare box how much it costs to operate the buses.
Fair enough, but am I hearing you right when you say you don't think government ought to subsidize bus passes? Yes or no? Or
yeah.
I
guess I could say yes.
I mean,
whatever it takes to get people on the buses. But what I'm talking about is employer subsidized bus passes.
So you're not talking about something for all city residents,
and
sponsored by the government.
That would be great too. That would be great too. But we also, at the same time, do need to increase the convenience for people. Charlie's right. People are currently not taking the bus right now because it's not as convenient as people driving their own cars. So we need to increase the level of bus service with more east-west bus connections, and we need to make sure we defeat Initiative 695. That will cost us $100 million to Metro and bus service alone. And Charlie has said that he would like to challenge the statement that services would need to be cut, that he thinks that's part of this anti-695 propaganda. That is how important this is about increasing service. 695, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, would decrease service.
Fair enough. We're not having a 695 debate, however, today. Next time, let me ask you a final question here on the police citizen expert review panel that Mayor Cheryl commissioned and that reported about police accountability recently. Charlie Chong, are you in favor of the most notable recommendation, which is the Office of Professional Accountability, staffed by a civilian who still reports to the chief, but now is in charge of only internal investigations and wouldn't be a sworn officer? Will that help?
Well, I think, and I support the mayor in what he's doing, which is an improvement in the situation. However, I think that's not enough. That's not enough. It's not going to help the citizens who complain, and it's not going to help the police officers who get complaints against them.
Because?
You have one.
Still reports to the chief? Or?
No, that's not the issue. The issue is you have one civilian surrounded by other police officers. There's still that blue wall in that situation. You simply do not have any guarantee that it's going to be better.
What would? I mean, this whole outside citizens review panel, which is talked about by some, is that
Actually,
the better accountability measure?
See, I'm not in favor of that. I've seen citizen review, not review, but citizen panels in hundreds of situations. They don't always work. I would be more in favor of establishing a court system with citizens who complain getting, if they need some legal counsel, and police, especially the police, getting defending counsel. Okay? And the court system where you have a judge making the decisions and watching the process.
Put these issues and these questions and allegations into a court system and not internal investigations.
That's right.
Heidi Wills, we have about a minute left. Your thought on this idea of a Office of Professional Accountability staffed by a civilian?
Yes, the people of the city deserve accountability, and there needs to be public accountability. I think that the task force report is a good one. I think that we need to have civilian oversight, and I support it.
That office?
Yes.
We leave it there. Both of you are well spoken. Thank you for being here today, taking your time out of your schedules.
Appreciate this.
The vote is November 2nd. Stay with us. Up next, Judy Nicastro and Cheryl Chow, finalists for City Council position number 1 after this short break. We now move to another of the open seats up for grabs this year, City Council position number 1. With me here in the studio are the 2 finalists. Cheryl Chow was a Seattle City Council member for 8 years until 1997, when she made an unsuccessful bid for mayor. Since then, she has served in interim administrative positions for the Seattle School District. Also here, Judy Nicastro, who is a buyer contract administrator for Boeing. Last year, she founded a housing and rental advocacy group called Local Housing Needs Local Laws. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
We'll begin with a 1-minute opening statement. Judy Nicastro, you first. Why do you want to be on the council?
Well, I would love to be on the council to represent the unspoken people who are the renters in our city. 52% of our population rents, and they currently have no voice on the city council. I am a renter, and I believe that we need a strong voice for renters' rights. Also, I believe that we need a city council that will start acting on our most important issues, such as transportation and housing affordability. When it comes to traffic and transportation, we need to defeat 695, and we also need to make sure that the monorail starts moving along. We should have by now a funding option plan and a route plan. And I would love to serve on the city council and start legislating. I think we have a great city. It's a wonderful, lively downtown, and now we need to work on the infrastructure situation and start acting on some of our issues.
Cheryl Chow, you were on the council once. You now want a chance to serve again. Why? What's your hope and agenda this time around?
Well, I believe I laid down the basic foundation to make this a strong city. I supported the redevelopment in downtown, and that has worked out positively. Now we need to work in the neighborhoods, but more importantly, not just the neighborhoods in the city limits. We're talking about gridlock. We're talking about affordable housing. That's not just a city issue anymore. It's a regional issue. And I believe that my experience at the city level as well as the regional level will be a big plus for the citizens of Seattle, and that's why I'm very pleased that Governor Locke has recognized that. A number of county council members and state representatives acknowledge that experience, and I want to move forward in addressing issues that impact the city as well as the region.
Let me get into some questions here, and I start with you, Judy Nicastro, on the issue you really highlight there in your opening statement and that you highlight in your campaign, which is renters and affordability. You made a name for yourself last year by starting the local advocacy group called Local Housing Needs Local Laws. Got people pretty excited, and yet now it turns out that you don't support what many had hoped you would, which is rent control. Why not? Isn't rent control one of the best ways to stabilize costs for tenants?
Well, rent control is a whole bag of worms, first of all. The thing that what the group did is went down to repeal the rent control ordinance, the state law, because it's a very onerous law for city policy. Everything is interpreted as rent control that the city wants to do. Basic things, such as a right to renew a lease. You know, every business has a lease. I mean, that's just smart contract law, and that's considered rent control in our city, and that's not rent control. The right to mobile credit check, that's not rent control. When if a landlord has substantial code violations that are jeopardizing the health and safety of our residents, should they be allowed to raise rents, and if so, to what extent? But what I'm asking for is that we have a dialogue regarding the last of our affordable housing, which is the rental market, that we have a good dialogue about it and come up with policies.
Why not support the kind of rent control they have in New York, that they have in some other cities, where you guarantee some kind of profit for the landlord, but you also guarantee a modest rent increases for tenants? Why isn't that a good idea? And don't a lot of people hope you would advocate for that?
Well, I'm not advocating for it, nor am I disavowing it. I think that needs to be part of the discussion, but we need a discussion about all the options.
Don't you have a position on that?
No, actually, I don't have a position on that. Because we haven't had that discussion in the city of what would be best for Seattle. What's best for New York, California, New Jersey, that's up to them. You know, Seattle has an incredible history of being optimistic and fighting and figuring out what works best for us. And I would like that to be, and rent control can be part of that dialogue of how do we protect renters' rights and how do we get more affordable housing.
Cheryl, Chow, do you have a position on rent control?
Yes, I'm glad to hear that Judy's moved towards my position. I don't believe rent control is the answer to housing affordability. I think that there's a number of ways that we should address it. The accessory housing units, which some people call mother-in-law apartments. I want to start a home sharing with people who may be on fixed incomes or seniors, where the city will screen through some home partnerships. And that could be struggling young families, it could be students, but it's very intimidating for a single homeowner to pull in somebody into their home. I think there's also other ways, townhouses, and working with developers to provide low-income housing units in any type of development. But I think the important part is the scale and the quality, and to make sure neighbors who are going to be impacted are part of the decision making.
Why not rent control? Why not something like New York or some of the other cities have tried, where you try and mandate a certain amount of profit for a landlord, but you give some relief in effect to tenants? Why is that not a good policy?
History shows that, and statistics show that this doesn't work, because if, in fact, I tell you as a landlord, you could only have a certain rent, then what is the incentive for you to keep up the property, to make sure that there are improvements? It's shown in Chicago, it's shown in New York that it doesn't work. It wouldn't work in Seattle. And, you know, I'm sorry, but this is America, and people who have property and ownership to land have certain rights too. And I think working together in making sure that the quality of the units are safety and health requirements, and if any person isn't, then the city needs to deal with those. But to go with the shotgun approach with rent control is not right.
Judy Nicastro, if not rent control, how would you ease the burden on the 52% of the citizens who are renters?
Sure. See, there's actually two things here. First of all, there's protecting the rental market, what we've got now, the existing renters and what they have. And then the second issue is how do we increase supply? Now, what I'm saying is that we need a dialogue, of which rent control is part of that dialogue. I think that needs to be in there. Many states have had successful rent control ordinances, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., and let's have that dialogue at the table with renters, landlords, developers, all of us figuring out how do we protect the existing housing that we have, the existing renters who are being gouged out by often out-of-state companies. And then how do we increase the supply as well through the nonprofits, with the developers setting aside a certain percentage of units? I think that those are two dialogues that need each other, but that we need to have.
I don't suspect you'll get many people who will disagree that it's all right to have a dialogue, and yet what are some of the contributions you would make to that dialogue? I mean, do you have some proposals that you would say, here, these are my ideas for making housing more affordable?
Yeah, absolutely. And, well, for dialogue number one, as far as renters' rights, what we need for renters' rights, the problem is anything that the City Council wants to do, such as the right to renew a lease. Seniors get, many renters are now experiencing, especially this is very hard for seniors, get a letter from their landlord, your rent is now 30% more. You agree to that. You say, fine, I'll pay that, but I want a lease for 1 year. Your landlord says, no, I'm not giving you a lease, you're on month to month, which leaves the renter in awful anxiety, knowing that their rent can go up in 2 months, 3 months. That is preempted by the rent control law, the state law. And I think that should be, we should be allowed to do basic laws such as that.
Renters have a right to a lease.
Exactly.
In effect. And you said seniors, but do you mean everyone?
It's happening. I've heard about it primarily through seniors. There are a lot of people now who are on month to month instead of being allowed to have a lease to lock in their housing costs. To me, first of all, it's contract law. And it's just smart stabilizing for a community. That's not a lot to ask. Every business has it, and we should put that in the residential.
Cheryl Chow, are requiring leases a good idea?
I think discussing it, as Judy always says, is good. Good business sense. A landlord would want a lease, I would assume, because it gives stability.
Predictability for them.
Right, yeah. Predictability, and it cuts out on the wear and tear. So I think it's a possible win-win situation.
There's other things we can do. Yeah, well, I mean, by having this, by bringing these issues up and having this discussion, I heard about a landlord who wants long-term tenants, so he gives you a rebate. He gives you a 1% back. The idea here is, how do we... For
being there so
staying,
long.
yeah. The more when you sign a lease, you get a 1 year, 1%. That's what we need, is to give disincentives to the gouging, the companies like RP Management that come in and gouge, which is what just happened up at the Biltmore, and positive incentives to our mom and pops and to the long.
How do you give disincentives to the gougers?
Well, one way is through, if you raise rents, if you double someone's rent, if you take somebody's rent at $500 a month, which is happening, and you double it to $1,000, that tenant has 6 months to move out.
That would be your proposal. Right now it's 60 days.
Yes. Well, I don't know the exact numbers, what we should do. They just increased it to 60 days. If your rent goes up more than 10%, you have 60 days as opposed to 30 days. Mm-hmm. Well, what if we continue to extend that based on the amount that someone, based on the percentage that they're going to raise the rent as a disincentive? People's incomes don't go up that much. Yeah. That's, your income goes up 4%. To get a letter that your rent is now double, and renters don't have $10,000 stocked away in the bank. Most of them don't. They're living paycheck to paycheck. So how can it be fair? Get the fare increases, but not completely displace individuals and those communities.
Or at least give them more notice.
Exactly.
If you're going to price them out of it.
Exactly. 6 months notice to come up with your $3,000 or $4,000 that you're now going to need, either to move or to come up with just an extra $500 a month. That's a lot of money to come up with.
Cheryl Chow, good idea to expand that from 2 to 6 months, at least for maybe the higher rent increases?
Yeah, the concept makes sense. How you bring people to the table and who gets to have the input and the final say, I think, is the important difference. Whether the city should mandatorily do this is a big question mark. So I think that's something to be decided. But the lease, the rent control that Judy speaks so well to, is just a very small piece with regards to how we're going to provide housing affordability in the city of Seattle with the growth that we're going to have in the next decade.
Fair enough, but let me move on. Cheryl Chow, for the last couple years, since you lost your bid to be mayor, you have worked for the Seattle School District. It's no surprise to anyone that you have a strong commitment to kids and have made them a priority for your entire career. Are you letting them down by leaving the district just when we're implementing all these John Stanford recommendations and proposals to create a first-class, world-class school district?
No, I'm not letting them down. In fact, I'm going to be able to help all of them. In my role now.
Better in your role in council than you would if you stayed at the district?
Yes. And the reason why is because I will be able to bring an expertise of how complex the education system is about. And also, what we have to remember is that children leave the building. They're only in the school for 8 hours. What happens after the school bell rings? And that's where the city is very, very instrumental and where it's paramount that we address issues of kids and families. That's why I made sure that on the second education levy, we put in after-school component, and especially for the middle school children. Those are the kids that are too old for babysitters, but too young to work. And so the park department, the Seattle Park Department, and the Seattle Public Schools have started a partnership where we provide structured activities, and more than just sports. We have different clubs and have chess club, cultural club, arts clubs, where the kids are taken care of. And also, if you let
Final thought.
Okay, final thought is, human services. If these kids don't come to school supported with food in their stomach and ready to work, it's hard for teachers.
Let me ask you about your commitment then to the council. If you get elected to the council, it's a 4-year term. You ran for mayor once 2 years ago. There's another mayoral election in 2 years. Can you pledge to fill out this 4-year term, or
Yes.
or will you jump into the mayor's race?
No, I wouldn't. My commitment would be to fulfill the 4 years. When I ran for...
But certainly when you ran, you were at the end of your term.
Correct.
Last time.
Yes, so I didn't not fill my commitment.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Judy Nicastro, the monorail. You mentioned it in your opening statement. You have said that you're inclined towards taking this monorail plan and putting it up to a vote of the people.
Yes.
There was one vote that was really a conceptual vote, didn't include any money, and you're in favor. Is it right to say to have another vote on the monorail that includes a funding mechanism?
Yeah, the voters approved that, and I believe that when the voters approve something, that that it's for government to start implementing that. And what we need to now start implementing is the route options and the funding options. So I would like to see something go to the voters next year if we cannot work out a private agreement, if the private sector does not want to pick up the full tab, and they're still negotiating that now.
What happened with the monorail? We had this vote, as you say,
Yeah.
and it doesn't seem to have gone anywhere. Is that because it just has become too impractical as they talk to private industry?
No, if anything, it's become more practical. There's a lot of buzz about them doing a circular downtown, so I think that it is getting steam. The thing is, there was no political leadership on it. It came up out of the blue. The voters approved it. There was no money attached to it. And no one on the council wanted to take the lead on that. And that's okay. I mean, they can't take the lead on everything. And politically, I think it's a difficult issue. Anything regarding transit is going to be difficult. Conceptually, like you said, we liked it. Now, once we go into the communities and say, hey, how about it coming down your street? That's a different story.
Money?
Exactly. Here's what the cost is, and here's that. But again, I go back to, I believe that we have a duty, government has a duty to bring that back to the voters and ask them, are you willing to pay it? And here is a routing plan. Or let's start having those discussions in the neighborhoods. And if it is so problematic, then do we need to do a trolley system? Do we need something else? We cannot just rest on light rail. It will not solve our congestion problem, and I'm deeply concerned about that.
Cheryl Chow, let me just ask you about the monorail. Would you support a second vote on the monorail to try and at least get some funding?
The first vote is exactly what you said, conceptual. I know a lot of people that voted for it because they says, well, I'm so upset with congestion. Will the monorail solve the problem of congestion
on the freeway? No. Will it solve the problem in our many different neighborhoods? That's very questionable. So I would rather spend the time and the energy if there's no private funding that comes forward, and that was what the voters voted on, as long as private funding came forward to move it forward. If that doesn't happen, then I would rather spend the city's time and energy in making sure that we get our bus transportation into the neighborhoods. We've done pilot programs before where we have many buses, circular buses, and we know where people want the buses and need the buses. The point is we have to get those to the neighborhoods so they get out of the cars. Monorail is going to be another impact on neighborhoods. The whole idea of taking away the skyline view with a monorail is a very big concern, and the impact on construction.
Let me ask you about the sound transit problem that seems to have come up lately. Several problems with it, controversies, if you will. Your reaction to this surface light rail versus a tunnel in southeast Seattle, Judy Nicastro?
First of all, we have to move forward on light rail. We're online for the federal funding. I don't want us to lose those dollars. Ideally, light rail should go up to Northgate because that's smart for the environment. It will reduce the amount of buses that go on 3rd Avenue, which I think will have a detrimental impact on businesses. So I'd like to see us, in the first phase, get it up to Northgate and continue to seek funding for that. Ideally, I'd like it to be underground the whole way. Can we afford that? I don't, right now we can't. I like the fact that they have $50 million in mitigation, and we need to make sure that those businesses that get displaced are not.
For Southeast.
Exactly, for the Southeast, yes, area. Do not suffer. And I think that that's something the council can work with.
How do we get money to take it to Northgate? The problem is it's got to stop at the U now because about $300 or $400 million just to get it up there. I'll give you a chance, but
yeah,
Judy,
I mean the
state,
state. The state has not put any money into this, and we need the state's help. This is, Seattle is, it's a regional issue, it's a state issue. Thousands of people are on our roads, and it would be wonderful if the state starts helping out.
Cheryl Chow, you live in Southeast. What's your reaction to the light rail on the surface proposal, and secondly, about how you get money to go to Northgate?
If I had a magic wand, it wouldn't be on surface. I don't have that magic wand. So we need to work to make sure that the impact is going to be positive. How do we get the money to get to Northgate, which is essential? That's where my experience at the regional table will be very, very helpful.
How so?
Because the state has not put any funding into this whatsoever. And it's time for them to come to the table and start saying, if we're going to be able to move the goods from east side of the mountains to the ports and beyond, and our state depends, we're the state that has the most export-import livelihood in the United States. And if we are to get those trucks and trains moving to our ports and beyond so that we have this economic boom, then we all have to work together, and the state has to come to the table.
And you think they'll be convinced this time? I mean, it's not as though the argument hasn't been made. We've tried to get state money.
Well, that's why I believe, because of my endorsements from the governor, from State Senator Thibodeau, from Adam Klein, from Mary Lou Dickerson, Ken Jacobson.
I think that'll help you out.
Well, they're recognizing that Seattle needs to move forward with this, and they recognize that my experience with regional issues and with regional players will make a positive impact.
Let me ask you both a related question about transit. I asked the last group of people that were here, Charlie Chong and Heidi Wills, about how you get more people on buses. What is the incentive that will get us from 40% capacity, which is what we're at, to something like 60, 70. I mean, if you got to 50%, I think everyone would be happy. Are bus passes the answer?
Let me try.
Okay, you start first, and then we go to Judy Nicastro.
Well, Heidi Wills, when she was president of the UW, pushed that UPass, which is a big success. And yeah, that's part of it.
Which is subsidized passes.
Right.
Would you do that for every city resident?
Yes, let's try it out. Let's try it out. But more importantly, let's have bus routes that get there every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes. Why would anybody want to get on a bus if it's going to be an inconvenience? So not only the bus passes, but the routes and where it goes. And that's got to change.
Judy Nicastro, Charlie Chong was here and he said you could put a ride-free area through the whole system and you're still not going to get people to use buses like you want because cars are more convenient and they're more safe, and when you got kids to take to daycare and all the rest, you can't do it in buses. Is that true, or well, would you get more riders if you subsidized it more heavily through bus passes? Your response?
I think that's partially true. Certainly when you have a carload of kids and you're carpooling, no, and that's exactly what we want the cars to be used for, carpooling, so that's fine. I'm not convinced that a free bus pass, which I'd love to see, nobody's yet to discuss the dollar amounts, exactly who's going to pay for this and how much and where's the money going to come from. I'm not so convinced that that will get everyone on the buses or enough people. Is it worth a try? Yes, I do. I think that we're at such a congestion crisis that it's worth a try to do that. But if we don't have negative incentives for parking, if parking is still inexpensive, will that be enough as well? And I'm not sure about that yet. I don't know if we need the two hand in hand. Do we need a commuter tax, which we would obviously have to get from the state?
How do you make parking more expensive, though? I mean, assuming you mean maybe you mean downtown. Well, let's just take downtown parking. I mean, it's not city run. I guess the city owns a couple of garages, but how do you make Diamond Parking or Republic Parking or whoever it is charge more? I mean,
well, yeah, I know that Mr. MacGyver. Yeah, it is. Well, no, Mr.
It's not
MacGyver.
exactly cheap, right?
No, they've discussed trying to get the ability to do a commuter tax, parking tax.
So tax those people who park in a Diamond lot, for instance.
Right. But again, commuters. And I don't know the intricacies of how that would be done. But looking at negative incentives and positive. I mean, when it gets bad enough is when we get on the bus, most people, or it's so inexpensive and it's convenient. We've got to consider all those factors. The challenge is, it isn't run by the city of Seattle, it's run by King County Metro, and we just have a voice on that. We have a small voice on that. So I think making sure that the constituents are contacting the right people and that we have a strong voice to get our message across and see what changes can be made is important.
Cheryl Chow, quick response to that?
Yeah, it's part of the education too. We thought smoking was and seatbelts, to get people using seatbelts.
We thought we'd never do it?
Right, yeah. But a lot of it is education. But the key factor is the convenience and getting more bus routes there. During the summer school this session, we gave kids free bus passes because there's a generation of children who have been carpooled by their parents and their moms that haven't even been on buses. So we have to introduce it to the generations, if you will. But convenience and more bus routes to people's neighborhoods and homes.
Time for one more question. The mayor had a citizen review panel overlooking the police department. Their most notable recommendation is an office of professional accountability, a civilian under the chief, sort of in the chain of command there, who would oversee internal investigations. Good idea, or should we have a citizen's panel outside that takes over that?
You end with such a fluffy topic. I believe these are good steps moving forward, but I still would support and propose a citizen review board external to the police.
Because, quickly?
Department. Because we can't ever lose public trust, because it's that important, and I think that it can be worked out where it's fair and safe to the police officers. Most of them are wonderful. We have a great police department, but we can't lose public trust, and I think if we implemented something now, that would have a good impact.
Cheryl Chow, your thoughts on this professional accountability office?
Yeah, first good step. And I think that's where Judy and I tend to differ a great deal in the civility laws. When I was on the council, I supported the ordinances for drug loitering, and I supported the ordinances for not urinating in public, and I supported the sidewalk ordinances for a reason, because we want to keep the quality of life. And I put checkpoints and check-in points for the police to report back to make sure it was
Fair enough, but
implemented.
before we go here, because we can't get into that new topic, you will support this
Yes.
citizen review office.
Yes, I will.
I got to leave it there.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Cheryl Chow and Judy Nicastro, Seattle City Council candidates. The vote is November 2nd. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for upcoming Seattle Citizen programs where we will feature the finalists for the other City Council positions up for election this fall. Check the Seattle Citizen homepage on the city's website for a schedule of future broadcasts. That internet address will appear in our closing credits. We can be seen every Wednesday night at 7, Fridays at 9, and Sunday mornings at 10 a.m., as well as other times as our TVC schedule permits. And that'll do it for today. On behalf of everyone here at the program, I'm C.R. Douglas. Thanks for watching. See you next time.